Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
This episode of Living the Gospel of Life. I'm your host, Leticia Velasquez, and we're very blessed today to have a very special guest who will soon be hosting her own show. But before we get started, as always, we'll start with a prayer from the end of Pope St. John Paul II's Gospel of Life, Evangelium Vitae. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Mary, bright dawn of the new world, Mother of the living, to you do we entrust the cause of life. Look down, O Mother, upon the vast numbers of babies not allowed to be born, of the poor whose lives are difficult, of men and women who are victims of brutal violence, of the elderly and sick killed by indifference or out of misguided mercy. Grant that all who believe in your Son may proclaim the gospel of life with honesty and love to the people of our time. Obtain for them the grace to accept that gospel as a gift ever new, the joy of celebrating it with gratitude throughout their lives, and the courage to bear witness to it resolutely, in order to build, together with all people of goodwill, the civilization of truth and love, to the praise and glory of God, the Creator and Lover of life. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, I am proud to introduce to you Dr. Mary Anne Urlakis. She is classically lettered in philosophy and bioethics, an independent bioethicist who provides ethical consultation, support, and advocacy to individuals and institutions. Her work involves continued research, particularly within the scope of the history of medical ethical praxis, the philosophical and theological underpinnings of sound moral reasoning, and the value of virtue ethics and natural law theory. She is staunchly pro-life and an advocate for the rights of vulnerable human persons, specifically those at the edges of life, the unborn, the terminally ill, and the elderly. Welcome, Mary Anne. I'm so grateful to have you here today.
Thank you so much. It is an honor and a privilege to be here on your show. And thank you for the invitation.
Oh, it's quite the honor. I understand that our producer, Dr. Mahfood, was anxious to have you on, and he pursued you relentlessly because of your wonderful work with another professor at my local seminary, Holy Apostle Seminary in Connecticut, Dr. Elizabeth Rex. And together you head up the Donum Vitae Institute. You co-founded it, and you are the executive director. Please tell me what that is. Tell my audience what that is.
The Donum Vitae Institute is dedicated to addressing the needs of nascent human life, particularly within the context of the papal document, Donum Vitae. That document was authored by Cardinal Ratzinger before he was Pope Benedict, and it carries the force of life. It is a beautifully worded document. Pope Benedict was so very dedicated to nascent human life. He held the first vigil for nascent human life. It is that life between the moment of conception and birth, and the ethical issues that are specifically related to embryonic and fetal life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's a portion of what I do. I do work with Dr. Elizabeth Rex, and we have co-founded the Donum Vitae Institute. Recently, Dr. Elizabeth Rex and I were invited speakers at the conference on Humanae Vitae in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It was a bishops' conference, and we were invited along with others by Victoria Thorne. Vicki Thorne is a close friend of mine, and she is the president and founder of Project Rachel. Project Rachel is the largest and most successful post-abortion ministry in the world. And Vicki Thorne had been asked by His Excellency Archbishop Jerome Lestecki to put together a symposia in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Humanae Vitae. And she asked, there were several speakers, Dr. Rex and I were among the last two to speak that day. So one of the areas that I am particularly involved with this year in particular is Humanae Vitae, and the document regarding the beginnings of life and the sanctity of human life.
Very timely, as you know, was the 50th anniversary this summer, and I've been privileged to hear Dr. Janet Smith speak in two of her appearances in the New England area, and she has always been a wonderful spokeswoman as well for the beauty and the dignity of human life as expressed through Saint Pope Paul VI document, Humanae Vitae, much maligned and seldom read, although it's only 67 pages, and it's very easy to read. More has been written about it by people who probably didn't read it or don't appreciate it anyway, than by people who have.
Exactly.
So I think we can't spend enough time talking about it.
It's 7,000 very short words, and it is brilliantly written. The warnings that St. Pope Paul had issued in that document, had we listened, we were seeing the unfortunate fruit of much of the world rejecting that document. And he had warned about what would happen to the relationship between men and women, what would happen to the family. Point by point, all of the warnings that he issued have prophetically come true. So yes, that document is one of my loves. I was recently in Rome. We were not there for his canonization. We were there 2 weeks before, and I had the privilege to pray at his tomb for 5 days in a row while we were there.
Wonderful. Well, I'm sure he's praying for the church now to understand, and sometimes we only understand saints after their death or well after their death, as the church, in the history of the church, you can see that very often. Saints often had a tough time living out their faith while they were alive. And unfortunately, the church is sometimes the biggest problem for some of them, because they speak truths that are they're challenging for us and against the tide of human events. And the way the tsunami of the sexual revolution is pushing mankind is a very frightening direction. As you said, Pope St. Paul VI has predicted many of the issues, including governments wanting to control men and women's fertility, including the devaluation of the sexual act, as particularly women's dignity. All these things we're seeing in just really, really shattering ways. And maybe we will come back to realize what a gift that document was later on, as I see it happening already. But never enough, right? So that's wonderful that you and Dr. X are working on that you spoke recently at that conference. By the way, we just learned today of the death of Bishop Morlino of Madison, I believe. Is Madison, Wisconsin? Is that your bishop?
He is one of the bishops in my state, and he was a incredible holy man and a phenomenal shepherd. I've had the privilege to meet with him on several occasions. The first time I met him, we were both speaking in front of the subcommittee for the State Assembly and the State Senate regarding a bill that unfortunately did not pass. It was AB 305, and it was the bill to outlaw the trafficking in fetal human parts. And I just stood in awe of him. He was an incredible shepherd. Last summer, I had the privilege of seeing him ordain a very good friend in his diocese, and just watch this young man through the seminary, and to see Bishop Morlino ordain him last July was incredible. He's a very good man, and he is going to be sorely missed, and praying that he rests in peace, that his memory be eternal, and that he intercede for us.
Absolutely, we definitely we really needed his leadership, and since we believe that our life goes on, and the church is universal, the church is he's in either part of the church suffering or the church triumphant right now. Only God knows, but we know that we can ask for his prayers either way for our church and for our world, and I certainly do.
He was staunchly pro-life and deeply involved in bioethics.
That's right. That's why he was very dear to my heart. So tell us a little bit about your background and what you've done up until this point. You have quite a long and interesting resume.
I've had my fingers in so many different things. I am pro-life in both my professional life and my private life. I try hard to live an authentically Catholic life in both facets. Professionally, I am a degreed bioethicist. I was the first graduate from the Medical College of Wisconsin's bioethics program, went on to Marquette. I have, and Kennedy after that. I also have 3 graduate certificates. I have a deep love for the East and the Pope St. John Paul's directive to have the church breathe with both lungs. I have a graduate certificate from St. Cyril and Methodius Byzantine Catholic Seminary. I have another in Catholic social teaching from the Catholic University, and another in Catholic medical ethics from the Catholic Medical Association. So I'm a perpetual student, but I'm also a homeschooling mom. I've taught at the university level. I've taught at the graduate and undergraduate level. I've done ethics at the bedside, and continue to consult and write and speak on topics of Catholic bioethics.
Well, it's a fantastic background. No wonder Dr. Mahfood was very anxious to get you your own show, and it's a wonder you can fit us in. So thank you so much for what you do in advancing the culture of life. How many children do you have, Mary Anne?
I have 8 children. I have 5 the old-fashioned way and 3 that were internationally adopted.
And you homeschooled all of them or some of them?
I homeschooled all of them at one point. The 3 that are adopted, their needs were a little bit different, and we began homeschooling with them as well, but I'm a firm believer in finding the best educational opportunity for each student, and homeschooling was not the best for each of the 3. So
I'm of the same mindset. My children were, or I call it hybrid homeschooling. They started home, and then we found Catholic school sometimes, and for my youngest with Down syndrome, it was a public school on and off. And now I'm still homeschooling the daughter with Down. She's 16. So yeah, whatever meets that student's need at the time, and whatever serves their soul best is a mother's job, right? We're the first educators.
That's it. And sometimes that can be really humbling because you think, I've been able to teach these other folks. How come it's just not working? And it's evident it's not the kids, it's me. And if I'm not able to speak to their minds and hearts in the way that it needs to be done, then we need to find another option. So my 2 youngest, I have one little one from Ethiopia and another one from Guatemala. They are both at a non-diocesan Catholic school, a Catholic school that I've also taught at. I have taught philosophy to their high schoolers, logic and basic philosophy. And my son is at a all-boys Catholic high school, boarding school. And the rest I've homeschooled, although now 2 of them are Holy Apostles undergraduate students, so I'm no longer homeschooling them. I have a son.
Are they seminarians, Mary Anne, or just undergraduates in the church?
They are undergraduates.
Holy Apostles has both a regular program, bachelor's program, and also a master's program for laymen, as well as being a seminary, a major seminary.
One is a junior in theology, literature, and the humanities, and the other is a freshman in sacred art and theology, and daughter number 3 intends to start next year in history and theology. She's my senior at home right now. So right now there's only 2 at home that I'm homeschooling. My eldest, my son, is a postulant. He just graduated from St. John Vianney Seminary in Minnesota, and he began his postulancy with the Order of Discalced Carmelites about a month ago.
Congratulations to him and to Mom and Dad. You must be so proud.
Please keep Kenny in prayer.
I will. It's a very interesting and challenging time of life. So in the midst of doing all this wonderful education of your children, you're also educating others in bioethics. How would you describe your approach to Catholic bioethics? What is your goal?
That is a great question. I think that we have some very challenging issues that society is throwing at us. And we as Catholics need to be in touch with the core value of the sanctity of human life. The Church Fathers have spoken on this from the very beginning, and I think sometimes we complicate the issue by making it too academic. If we turn back and look at the Church Fathers, the answers are often right there. And the Magisterium, the documents that have come out from Pope John Paul, Pope Benedict, Pope Francis, they all reiterate the faithful teaching that has been there from the beginning. When we look at these issues, we look at abortion. It was there. We go back to the Didache, we see the prohibition against abortion, against taking potions that would impair fertility or cause the death of a child from the first century. Yes, our dilemmas may be more complex because of the technology involved, but the basic fundamental principle that human life is made in the image and likeness of God, that each human life is sacred, that each human life, because it bears that imago Dei, that image and likeness of God, has an inviolable dignity, must be at the core of everything, every decision we have in bioethics and Catholic bioethics.
Of course, yeah. And, it does get more complicated, but the basics of respecting human life have been with us since the beginning as a church. Those that would say that, let's say, St. Augustine came up with the different theories of when life began, it doesn't change the fact that the church has respected, like you said, the marital act from the very beginning and has been against contraception in its many forms. We didn't invent contraception in this century, that's for sure, or the last. These things have been with us since the beginning, and the church has stood against them. And, of course, even then the Roman culture was very pro-death, as most people know, but they may have forgotten that infants were left out when they were rejected by their fathers. It was up to the father to accept or reject the infant. They were left out for exposure to be eaten by wild beasts. We like to consider that so horrible and bestial, but yet what are we doing in abortion? So things haven't changed that much since the beginning of Christianity, have they, Doctor?
No, they haven't. And even when we look back at the Hippocratic Oath prohibited the taking of the giving of an abortifacient. Right. Even in the pagan codification of a basic code of medical ethics, that respect for human life was there.
That's right.
So tracing that back to the natural law.
That's right. And they had to get rid of the Hippocratic Oath. The medical profession pretty much has done away with it as far as I can see. because it's pesky, isn't it? You know, that you should not give a woman means to procure an abortion. These sort of things get in the way of what is considered medical practice. Up on my computer today, Giving Tuesday approaches, Planned Parenthood has a banner which says "Care no matter what," and apparently death is considered care now in some medical circles.
It is, the Hippocratic Oath stands for some pretty inconvenient truths when we take a look at it, and when we take a look back at what the Church Fathers have stated. It never ceases to amaze me in a gut-wrenching way what the culture of death will do to repackage itself to look like it is good, and to take an evil act and present it as good. The words that are used, the total misrepresentation of what is good. You had asked before about, as a Catholic, how we should approach bioethics. One of the things that I'm always harping on is the transcendentals, looking at what is good, true, and beautiful. And when we look at an act like abortion, is it good? Is it true? Is it beautiful? Well, no. What is the truth that is there? The truth that is there is that child was made in the image and likeness of God, that child is a human person from the moment of conception. If one is being prompted to have an abortion to hide that pregnancy, that again speaks against the truth of what is already there. Euthanasia, any one of the basic bioethical issues that tend to polarize people, when we look at them in the sense of those transcendentals, it kind of gives us a framework to judge the validity of the action.
Of course, and of course now the abortion industry is trying to reframe that debate once again by celebrating abortions. They used to say that abortion was sad but necessary. I think Bill Clinton said rare, and safe. Safe, legal, and rare was the code word of the 90s. But now we're shouting our abortions. We're having parties and producing poetry and artwork and music, celebrating the death of our child. And so once again, like you said, the bioethicist is very busy helping unpack the culture of death and expose it for what it is in light of natural law and Catholic truth. And that's it's getting to be an increasingly necessary task as things spin farther and farther out of control in society, and our understanding of human life and even sexuality, our own gender, is being twisted, and people are very confused.
And again, going back to truth, there is an objective truth there, and when we take that truth and we redefine it, we repackage it, or we turn it into something that is relative and subjective rather than an objective truth, we have distanced ourselves from what is real.
Yep, and the average person in the pews thinks that anybody who calls himself a bioethicist, and I've heard of nurses that go to one workshop labeling themselves bioethicists because they've absorbed some of the quick packaging of the culture of death and don't have the philosophical and medical background that you have. And it's scary because, as far as I know, there's no requirement to call yourself an ethicist. There's no certification test. There's no educational minimum. So there's a lot of false teachers out there claiming to understand bioethics and certainly to give counsel on it. And it's truly frightening. Catholics need to go to some reliable sources. Could you name some, Dr. Urlakis, for us?
Oh, that is
an ethical dilemma.
That is a great question. And you're right. There is, unfortunately, the secular bioethicists would very much like to come up with a curriculum, an anti-life curriculum that will become the universal curriculum for a bioethicist. Because I did my training at a secular institution, the Medical College of Wisconsin. I have a foot in both worlds, thankfully, so I'm still invited to the table for those discussions. But if if it ever comes to pass that only the secular counts, we are going to have a real problem, because the values of human life are not going to be represented there. So it is the National Catholic Bioethics Center is very good. Let's see, Pope John Paul Institute, excellent. I'm developing a website, Catholic Inter Vitam at Mortem, Catholic Bioethics blog, and hopefully it's just a basic site right now, but I will be putting up some links to some good sites there as well. But it is very difficult. Bioethics is a relatively new discipline. It has only existed for about the past 90 years. And when we look at the amount of authority that the bioethicist has been given in our society, it becomes truly frightening. Yeah. We look at the Nuremberg trials and things like the Tuskegee syphilis study. There were horrific things that happened from the World War II era. The Tuskegee syphilis study was one of the most horrendous things. And it spanned from the 1920s to 1974 in Alabama. And we like to believe that we are above that now. But when you take a look at that particular study and the men and the families who were affected by being used as human guinea pigs in syphilis research, it was individuals from the most prominent medical schools, government officials who knew of this, and it spanned for decades, and nobody stepped in to stop it.
The more you go into the history of eugenics in the United States, and yes, it did start primarily in the United States, it's really terrifying. I'm afraid we're coming to the end of our program, but you provided wonderful interest in your own radio show, Dr. Urlakis. Could you explain the next couple of minutes what you will be doing on as part of our WCAT lineup, when your show will be and what it will cover?
Well, my understanding is my show will be airing on Mondays, I believe in the 1 o'clock time slot. And I will be interviewing folks with a expertise or a story to tell that's relevant to the field of Catholic bioethics. We're going to be exploring some topics in detail, and sometimes just taking a look at the magisterial documents that are out there, other times taking a look at the issues themselves and trying to point people in the direction of finding resources that will help them navigate through these thorny dilemmas.
Wonderful. What's the name of your show?
Inter Vitam at Mortem. Between life and between life and death. So many of these issues are in that zone, just at the edges of life and death, either from the nascent human life, the beginnings of life, or at the end of natural life. So Inter Vitam at Mortem expresses the between life and death. It's at that very edge where we find the bioethical dilemmas.
Thank you so much for describing your show. And for those of you who may work during the day, our shows are always available to listen to online at any time at WCAT Radio.com. You can always listen to them. I believe you can also download them on iTunes, so they can be basically podcasts. They're basically podcasts as well. So you need not be available Monday at 1 o'clock to listen to Dr. Mary Anne Urlakis. And I thank her so much for coming onto the show. We will have her back. She's got some more exciting projects lined up that we'll discuss in our upcoming shows. And I just wanted to thank you so much for the little window into the amount of your knowledge and how much our listeners of WCAT Radio can gain from listening to you, for tuning in to Inter Vitam and Mortem. And,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me on your show. It is an honor. I'm a fan of everything that you are doing with the Gospel of Life, and it is a privilege to be here and to begin by this introduction. Thank you.
Very good. And thank you for tuning in today to Living the Gospel of Life, full of life.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.